The date, November 22, 1963, is etched into the American memory. It was a day that began with bright Texas sunshine and ended in profound national darkness. President John F. Kennedy and First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy were in Dallas, part of a political tour through the state. They smiled and waved to enthusiastic crowds from their open-top limousine as it moved through the city streets. The atmosphere was one of celebration and political optimism, a scene of a young, vibrant leader connecting directly with the people he served. The images from that morning show a president at the height of his popularity, seemingly secure in the affection of his nation. As the presidential motorcade turned onto Elm Street and passed through Dealey Plaza, the unthinkable happened. At 12:30 p.m., the cheerful sounds of the crowd were shattered by the sharp crack of rifle fire. The president, who had been waving just moments before, suddenly slumped forward, a look of confusion and pain on his face. Another shot rang out, this one inflicting a devastating and fatal head wound. The scene descended into chaos and panic. Secret Service agents sprang into action, and the limousine sped away towards Parkland Memorial Hospital, but it was already too late. The brief, shocking moments of violence had irrevocably altered the course of American history. The news spread with bewildering speed across the country and around the world. In an era before the internet and 24-hour news channels, people learned of the shooting from frantic radio bulletins and television broadcasts that interrupted regular programming. Legendary CBS newsman Walter Cronkite, his voice heavy with emotion, famously announced the president's death to a stunned nation. In schools, offices, and homes, a collective sense of grief and disbelief took hold. The assassination was more than the death of a leader. It felt like a violent assault on the nation itself, a sudden end to an era of hope that had been dubbed Camelot. In the immediate aftermath, law enforcement launched a massive manhunt for the person responsible for this horrific act. The focus quickly narrowed to the Texas School Book Depository, a building overlooking Dealey Plaza from which the shots were believed to have been fired. Less than an hour and a half after the assassination, a Dallas police officer, J.D. Tippit, was also shot and killed. This second murder led police to a nearby movie theater, where they arrested a suspect named Lee Harvey Oswald. The nation now had a face to associate with the tragedy, but this was only the beginning of a story that would become one of the most debated mysteries of all time. In the wake of the assassination, the newly sworn-in president, Lyndon B. Johnson, sought to provide the grieving nation with definitive answers and restore public confidence. He established a special commission officially named the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy. But it would become universally known as the Warren Commission, after its chairman, Chief Justice Earl Warren. Its mission was clear: to investigate every aspect of the assassination and present a final, conclusive report on what had happened. For nearly a year, the commission gathered evidence, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and examined countless documents to piece together the events of that tragic day. In September 1964, the Warren Commission published its findings in an exhaustive 888-page report. Its conclusion was unequivocal and absolute. The commission determined that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting entirely alone, had fired 3 shots from a 6th-floor window of the Texas School Book Depository. It found no evidence that Oswald was part of any conspiracy, either domestic or foreign. The report also concluded that Jack Ruby, the nightclub owner who had murdered Oswald on live television just 2 days after the assassination, had also acted alone, driven by a state of emotional grief. The government's official narrative was set. 2 lone actors were responsible for the week's violent events. The commission's report detailed Oswald's troubled life, his defection to the Soviet Union, and his pro-Castro activities, painting a picture of a disgruntled and alienated individual capable of such an extreme act of violence. The lone gunman theory relied heavily on ballistic evidence, the discovery of Oswald's rifle, and his presence in the book depository at the time of the shooting. A key, and highly controversial, part of this conclusion was the single bullet theory, which posited that one bullet had caused multiple wounds to both President Kennedy and Texas Governor John Connally. For the government, the case was officially closed, providing a clear, if unsettling, explanation. However, from the moment the Warren report was released, it was met with significant public skepticism. Many Americans found it difficult to believe that a seemingly insignificant figure like Oswald could, by himself, murder the most powerful man in the world. The sheer number of unanswered questions and seeming inconsistencies in the evidence fueled doubts. The murder of Oswald by Jack Ruby before he could ever stand trial only deepened the suspicion that someone wanted to silence him. The official story, meant to provide closure, instead became the foundation for decades of debate, distrust, and an enduring search for an alternative truth. The official conclusion of the Warren Commission did little to quell the growing tide of public doubt. In fact, it seemed to have the opposite effect, sparking a cottage industry of books, articles, and independent researchers dedicated to challenging the lone gunman theory. These critics pointed to what they saw as major flaws in the official investigation, such as the mysterious chain of custody for key evidence, conflicting witness testimonies about the number and direction of the shots, and the infamous Zapruder film, which some argued showed the fatal shot coming from a different direction. The grassy knoll in front of the motorcade. These persistent doubts eventually led to further government inquiry. In 1976, the U.S. House of Representatives established the House Select Committee on Assassinations, or HSCA, to re-examine the murders of both President Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Using more advanced forensic techniques than were available in the 1960s, the HSCA conducted its own extensive investigation. In its final report issued in 1979, the committee delivered a bombshell finding. It agreed that Lee Harvey Oswald had fired the shots that killed the president, but it also concluded that there was a probable conspiracy, suggesting the involvement of at least one other unidentified gunman. This official government report directly contradicted the Warren Commission. The HSCA's conclusion opened the door to a wide range of conspiracy theories that had been circulating for years. These theories implicated various groups and individuals, each with a plausible motive for wanting President Kennedy removed from power. Some theories pointed to organized crime, angered by the relentless pressure from Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy's anti-mafia campaigns. Others suggested the involvement of anti-Castro Cuban exiles who felt betrayed by Kennedy after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. Still others, and perhaps the most persistent, pointed fingers at elements within the U.S. intelligence community, specifically the CIA, who may have viewed Kennedy as a threat to their power and autonomy. Despite its explosive conclusion, the HSCA was unable to definitively identify the other conspirators or the extent of their involvement. This lack of a final answer has left the field wide open for speculation that continues to this day. Filmmakers like Oliver Stone, with his 1991 film JFK, brought these complex conspiracy theories into the mainstream, convincing a new generation of Americans that the official story was a cover-up. The result is a deeply divided public perception, where polls consistently show that a majority of Americans do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, keeping the mystery alive and well. The enduring public fascination and distrust surrounding the assassination led to the passage of the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. This law mandated that all government documents related to the assassination be collected and eventually released to the public, with the goal of providing greater transparency. Over the decades that followed, millions of pages of documents were declassified, offering new and often tantalizing glimpses into the case. Recent administrations, including those of President Trump and President Biden, have continued this process, releasing thousands of additional files as recently as 2023. This ongoing effort reflects a persistent demand for answers from the American people. However, the promise of full transparency remains unfulfilled as of 2025. Many critical documents have been released only with heavy redactions, obscuring names, locations, and entire paragraphs of information. Some files are reported to be missing entirely, while others remain completely classified, withheld by intelligence agencies citing ongoing national security concerns. This continued secrecy has only fueled more suspicion. In 2024 and 2025, a House task force has been actively pushing for the release of all remaining files, accusing federal agencies of decades of obstruction, obfuscation, and deception in their handling of these sensitive records. Among the most sought-after documents are files related to CIA operations and their knowledge of Lee Harvey Oswald before the assassination. Researchers and even members of Congress have highlighted the importance of the Joanides files, which concern a CIA officer connected to anti-Castro groups that Oswald himself had interacted with. Other key records that are still not fully public include a whistleblower report, allegedly implicating the agency, Oswald's complete travel records, and files on other plausible suspects. While the CIA has signaled that some of these documents may soon be released, the continued withholding of certain files keeps critical pieces of the puzzle hidden from public view. More than 60 years after that fateful day in Dallas, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy remains an open wound in the American psyche. The official narrative of a lone gunman has been challenged by a subsequent congressional investigation and is rejected by a majority of the public. While recent document releases have added new layers of detail, they have not provided the definitive evidence needed to close the case once and for all. The full truth, it seems, is still buried in redacted files and the fading memories of the past. For now, the mystery continues, and a nation still waits for answers.